1867 Sports Show, special on the road edition for one of us this evening for episode number Anson Carter.
Bamba. Play La Bamba, baby. Woo! Let's go.
I figured when you said, yeah, no, I'm going to be doing it from my hotel room, I was like, oh, he's already booked a flight to Edmonton here to go and cheer on the Oil in person. And he's just going to shack up there. We're going to have some live boots on the ground style coverage for it. But you decided to go to Montreal for reasons unknown.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. But anyways, yeah, in La Belle Province currently, and yeah, just enjoying every second of it. But yeah, little nothing's gonna take me off my high horse right now with the Edmonton Oilers advancing to their first Stanley Cup since 2006. So let's get a golf clap for the Oil. Golf clap right off the hop for the Oil.
Love it.
But
the furthest Stanley Cup as far as the crow flies in NHL history, going from Sunrise up to Edmonton there was some heated debate on the interwebs about whether Vancouver and Boston was that, but turns out Buddy just was taking toll roads instead of actually a chartered flight. So I don't think Florida is going to be busing up to Edmonton, at least I hope not. But yeah, we've got quite the coast to coast, almost coast to prairies, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, not even knowing the context of the conversation you're referring to, if you want to look at an actual map east to west, then yeah, sure, it's probably further if you go from Vancouver to Boston. However, you have to incorporate the north and south aspects of the map as well. So not a lot of people know the latitude, longitude, restrictions that kind of play in there, but all the power to them for trying.
Look at you. We're just going to call you Magellan from now on. Cartographer Kirkwood.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, take us through the process, because they obviously punched their ticket through to the Stanley Cup, set some records in the process. Not all of them great. I mean, you got there, but how are you feeling coming off that, I guess, quasi-surprising victory based on how many shots were going on goal in that final deciding game there?
They don't ask how, they don't ask how many, they just ask how. Is that how it is? I don't know.
You could be making something up for all I know.
That could be. You know what? We're starting a new trend tonight.
Yeah.
We're making new sayings. But yeah, I mean, not their best performance if you want to look at the actual statistics. What did they get outshot? 33-10.
It was a plus 23
shot
differential, whatever the final tally was.
Yeah, I think it was 33-10 because I know Edmonton had 10. And that was it, because I could pretty much count them on both my hands. So, no, the good thing is
they didn't get that 11th and have to incorporate a foot into there.
Right? If I gotta put my 10 fingers back down and start over again at 1, I'm gonna be really upset. But at the end of the day, like I said, you get the job done. You go into the game to win. Doesn't matter how it looks, how ugly it is. You walk out. You won on home ice because I wasn't very confident if they would have lost that game if they had to go back to Dallas. So. Yeah, hey, Stuart Skinner, cousin Stu, put his big boy pants on in that Dallas series, because at the end of the day, he's the real reason why they won. And, everyone was kind of down on him, obviously, in the Vancouver series. Pickard had to come in to help him out and, let him reset for a couple of games. But I think that coaching decision by, Chris Knobloch was just so instrumental in turning Edmonton's fortunes around. Because if I were to look at where they were after 3 games and in that series against Vancouver, I would say Edmonton's done. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, you look at where they were flat, they were listless, they had no energy in any of their game. And they made that goalie change, and just from then on, they've just played such better team hockey. And yeah, going into that Dallas series, it was, they're gonna have to play pretty much A hockey for the entire series that they're going to win. And they did a pretty good job of it. We talked about it last episode. Everyone was kind of, oh, well, the sky's falling. Edmonton, doesn't look really good right now. They're down in the series. And, again, check the receipts. I kept Oiler Nation calm. I made sure that everyone was kind of understanding that.
The voice of reason.
The voice of reason. It's a long series, and, yeah, again, just for all the Oiler fans out there who've had to endure all the mediocrity that has been the Edmonton Oilers over the last 30 seasons. This was a really sweet victory, especially given the history between Dallas and Edmonton in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we kind of teed it up perfectly in our series preview there when we said, listen, these are two teams who are very familiar with one another, got a little bit of a history. You stack them up paper on paper, there's not a lot of flaws in either one of their lineups there. They're pretty evenly matched. It's going to come down to whether Skinner could steal a game for them here or there. And, absolutely was the case on that night where you've got just about every sports book had Ottinger as the Conn Smythe favorite going into the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. So for him to go out there and be good enough, right? I don't think we're going to be writing ballads about his heroics throughout the series quite yet, but he was good enough to get it done and allow his team to stick around long enough for those top line players to capitalize on the few chances that they did produce in that game.
Yeah. And I think the one real big positive shift, that all Oilers fans kind of look at is Edmonton's kind of controlled the pace of every game they've played in, right? Of that series. They outshot Dallas in every game besides game 6. They didn't need Stuart Skinner to be, the second coming of Marty Brodeur or Patrick Roy. Like, it was, I'm saying Roy, not Waugh. It's Roy. Okay.
In Quebec, of all places, is where this pronunciation's coming from.
Yeah, well, they ran him out of town. So let's just keep things in perspective here. But at the end of the day, it was always going to be who's going to step up next. It can't always be McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouchard. Now, given that point, obviously McDavid probably scored the goal of the playoffs for his first, and then Mr. Reliable. When you need a goal, give it to Zach Hyman because he's going to put the puck in the net. Draisaitl had 2 assists. Bouchard, I think had at least one. But again, he was playing plus hockey, all game. And it was the role players that kind of brought that game back because after those 2 goals, Edmonton didn't do anything offensively. It was really just about controlling Dallas on the side, making sure they limited their chances in their defensive zone. And Skinner made saves when he had to. And he got some really good, some good tests in that game. So you need your goalie to step up and kind of steal you a game or two. And Edmonton ultimately hasn't had to have that happen all playoff. And what a time for it to actually happen to punch their ticket to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, right. And you look at some of the narratives that were starting to quickly turn as that series wore on there, right? Darnell Nurse went from, oh, he's Mr. Reliable on the back end to the fans are packing his suitcase and preparing his plane ticket out of town for him already. And, winning covers up a lot of these things, right? But at the same time, too, the kind of knee-jerk armchair quarterback reactions that were going on as that series was wearing on. I can only imagine what's going to happen on the brightest stage of them all coming up here. But you know what? Like you said, they got there. I think a lot of people are pretty excited to see, McDavid finally get over that hump, and he is finally competing for Lord Stanley's mug here. And, it's never great to see generational talent kind of languish without ever getting a shot at it. And who knows what the future holds, right? But for him to at least have this year, right, that kind of bodes well for Edmonton fans' futures there as well, too, because suddenly those quiet whispers of like, oh, is he finally going to start eventually getting tired of Edmonton? They get quieted down even with a trip to the finals, because now they know it's not just, all right, it was another first round exit. Oh, we won a first round, but got our teeth kicked in the second round. We're nowhere close. It's, you're on the doorstep, and I love the press conference today where they were talking about like, well, you don't have a lot of Stanley Cup experience right now. And then I think the line of the playoffs so far, well, ask the Buffalo Bills about how much their Super Bowl experience, helped them out. So
the Buffalo Bills casually catching strays at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that was going to happen?
Absolutely. But it's going to be really interesting to see too. And, especially with the run that all of these South Florida based teams are on. Oh, weird. Go figure. And now we're talking all about state luxury tax and income tax and
Yeah.
CBAs. And are we going to make changes to that? And we'll maybe save that for another episode. But you look at who's been making the trips to the conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals out of the East, and a whole lot of Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers in recent years.
Yeah. Well, again, there was a pretty telling stat, and it kind of helps when you've got the top or three of the top four picks from the 2014 draft on your team. And it just so happens that Edmonton has the third overall pick from that draft. So it's the first time ever that this has ever happened. That again, I'm just saying this because one, it kind of fits your point, but it also just stuck out to me as being an interesting moment. But you've got the top four picks from the 2014 draft all playing against each other for the first time in history.
Yeah.
So again, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And I mean, you've got, the Ekblads, the Reinhardts, the Bennetts, to match up with, your Kachucks and your Barkovs and whatnot. Like, Florida's got as deep of a team, I think, that you're going to see in the league. They're big, they're physical, they play hard hockey. And anyone who doesn't like Paul Maurice as a coach, you don't like coaches. Like, he's the epitome of what I think any player who puts on a hockey sweater would want to play for. So yeah, and then you go over to the Edmonton side, and we could rattle off all the the big players on that team as well. But I think obviously the narrative is pretty much Edmonton has the star roster. Now it's finally time for them to put their test their mettle, so to speak, on the biggest stage, like you were mentioning.
Yeah, and not just that, but they've got a chance to exercise some demons for all Canadian teams north of the border, because we are now 31 years since your current hometown Montreal Canadiens won it all in 1993 there. So
it's not my hometown. We're currently where I am.
Current dwellings.
My current location.
Yeah. But, that kind of segues into our next topic there of, obviously, we've had teams that have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals from Canada. They fell an agonizingly short. They've gotten blown out in some other instances as well, too. But it's not for lack of Canada having opportunities to end this 3-decade-long drought here. But we thought, going back through the list of those who have made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, which one was the team you were most surprised didn't end up winning it all when you look back on it now?
Yeah, and this one I kind of really juggled with, because there's two very, very good answers here, but I got to go with the Vancouver Canucks' most recent trip to the Stanley Cup in 2011. The reason I say that is because you look from top to bottom, that Vancouver roster was, again, one of those stacked rosters that you don't see assembled very often. From the Sedin twins to Kessler to Burrows, you look on the back end, you got Bieksa, you've got Edler, you've got a very good blend of talent. And then obviously in net, you've got one of the best goaltenders of all time, Roberto Luongo. So, I mean, whenever you have that kind of mix of players that can all be healthy at the same time, that's when you see those magical runs happen, right? And Vancouver was just, it was kind of a magical year because they finally exercised the demon of the Chicago Blackhawks, right? They almost blew a 3-0 lead. They score in overtime to eliminate Chicago. And then they kind of went on to, all right, now we're going to show our President Trophy, pedigree that we just had. Now we're going to show our, offensive prowess that we've been showing all season. Now we're going to show how we can shut teams down on the defensive side, because again, Roberto Luongo playing absolutely lights out. And then they go to the Stanley Cup against the Boston Bruins, who kind of were like that scrappy underdog type of team. Like you didn't have the Patrice Bergeron of 5 years ago, right? You didn't have the Brad Marchand 5 years ago or today. You had kind of some other guys who were maybe in the middle part of their career, but people didn't really know where they were going to go. Like Zdeno Chara was still a great defenseman, but was he the same type of player, at his peak? Maybe, maybe not. Tim Thomas, one of the most polarizing people in league history. And yeah, when he was on, great goalie, fantastic goalie. But when he was off, he was letting in 7-8 goals a game. So that was just one of those teams where you figured Boston kind of, nickel and dime their way to the Stanley Cup that year. And it was just going to be, well, Vancouver's on a roll right now. They've already beaten the juggernaut, with the Blackhawks. I think that this is going to be their time. And then, Boston starts to impose their will. Milan Lucic becomes more of a factor in the series. And, then you kind of see the tides turn, but it still went to 7.
No.
Then we see the Vancouver Canucks of old just can't, close out, which has been their MO forever. And then the riots happen, right? So that's
why we're getting a nice ESPN 30 for 30 about pretty shortly, actually, as well, too. So stay tuned for our video review of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's actually a very good topic to have a documentary on, because you think about, and we talked about this a couple of episodes ago, like the passion that the Vancouver fan base has, really is unrivaled for a lot of different teams, right? And they've kind of flipped the narrative on how they're perceived. But yeah, back then it was, okay, we lose, like shit's burning down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why in my mind it was the most, what's the best way to put this? It was the hardest championship to not win, and for their fans to swallow, because Vancouver just had such a stacked lineup from top to bottom. They had 4 lines who could score. They had a good defensive group. They had an all-world goaltender, and they couldn't get the job done. So that's my pick.
Yeah.
What do you think? What are you thinking?
And it's a great pick too, right? I kind of flip-flopped between a few of them. Some of them you're pretty quick to rule out, like the bubble Montreal Canadiens, just a weird year, like just happy to be there type thing, right? So like some of them were quick dismissals. Other ones, it's the sentimentality of it, like, oh, Ottawa made it, but listen, they ran into an absolute buzzsaw and they got handled pretty easily by the Anaheim Ducks there in that series. So they left very little to the imagination as to who was the superior team in that final. So I ultimately ended up going with the good old Calgary Flames in their magical run for a lot of the same reasons that you kind of laid out there for Vancouver as well, too, right? You've got Iginla probably at the peak of his powers, I would say at that point. Kiprusoff is doing probably the unquestioned best goaltender on the planet at that point in time right there. And there was just so much depth to that team. And I think they were a weird team in the sense that they really underperformed for a lot of the regular season, but caught fire once the postseason hit, right? And so they were a team that when they matched up on paper, Tampa Bay, obviously they won their division, right? They were the first seed. Like it wasn't like they limped into, how did we get here type thing. Like they were every bit the team that was deserving to come out of the East that year.
Yeah.
But you could see it in the games that Calgary won. They looked like, we're a class above, Tampa Bay right now. But Tampa just seemed to get every single bounce imaginable. It was one of those things where it really made you look at like how much luck goes into sometimes winning a championship. Obviously, I'm not saying that, it was a fluke by any stretch of the imagination. You got Martin and St. Louis, you got LeCavalier, you've got at that time young John Tortorella coaching the team, right? Like so they had an absolute bevy of players that were playing at a very, very high degree of hockey. But when you've got a matchup between two teams performing at such a high clip, it's going to come down to some of these fluky moments sometimes in sports.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you ask a lot of Calgary fans, they were a bounce or two away from not only winning it, but maybe even, winning it in 5 games, right?
Well, and that's what I was just about to say. Like, you think about Game 6, about that no goal that was called when the replay clearly showed the puck was, fully over the line. That wins Calgary the Stanley Cup right there.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, it's that was the one I was flip flopping on, because to your point with Jarome Iginla being at his peak, we don't see single players kind of drag their teams, to a Stanley Cup or to a championship in general, especially in hockey. Hockey's such a team sport. You need everybody firing on all cylinders. But Jarome Iginla was otherworldly in that playoff run. He was so fun to watch because not only did He was playing fantastic offensive hockey. He was hitting, he was fighting, he was basically he was in the mix at every single big moment of Calgary's cup run. And I think the moment that sticks out to everybody was seeing, Iginla and Lecavalier squaring off in the Stanley Cup, which was just fantastic. Mm-hmm. Two great hockey players. You're not having the Ty Domi's fighting the Bob Proverts. Like, these guys are legitimate 100 points, goal scorers. Yeah. So yeah, that's ultimately what playoff hockey, was. And that 2004 playoffs in general was just such a great, overall playoff, not to mention the great Stanley Cup that we had. But yeah, on that point, here's a trivia question that a lot of people would get wrong from the Tampa Bay 2004 Stanley Cup team.
I can't wait to join that trend.
Yeah. Who was the captain for Tampa Bay that year?
Well, everyone would knee-jerk reaction to Lecavalier. Wasn't it Andrechuk?
Dave Andrechuk was the captain for the 2004 Tampa Bay Lightning Stanley Cup team. And because Lecavalier was the captain, had his captaincy stripped by Tortorella, and it was given to Dave Andrechuk, obviously being the veteran presence that he was at that time.
Yeah, the wily veteran there. But that was an absolutely phenomenal series, right? There's other ones that you could also look at as well too. Even Vancouver against the Rangers,
94.
The following year after Montreal ended up winning it all. And everyone's now got the Messier lifting the cup, the guarantee, the this, the that, all of that parade down Canyon of Heroes. Like, that's what you think of. But that was another really solid Vancouver team. And I mean, I've already made the comment of it. You seem to believe that no, Fernando Persani was clearly one of the top 5 player in the world at the time, and he carried the Oilers. But in my mind, they were a nice story, but a little bit more of the fluky side rather than a bona fide contender. Looking back on it in hindsight without your fan goggles on, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Listen, that was such a fun cup run to watch because you didn't expect them to win 1 round, let alone 3.
Yeah.
And again, you talk about individual players carrying the load and making it so that way everyone was kind of just jumping on the bandwagon. Like Chris Pronger, the only season that he was with the Edmonton Oilers, just happened to have one of the best playoff performances I've ever seen. Yeah. And I mean, you look at it, I'm still under the belief that you talk about Tampa Bay getting all those breaks in 2004. That was Edmonton in 2006. Like, they got every break imaginable, and it was great. As a fan, you love that because for years, the Oilers were so snake bitten that you kind of felt bad for them, right? And now you're seeing, the team finally kind of take that next step forward. And I'm a big believer that if Dwayne Rollison doesn't get hurt, they win that cup, right? But Carolina, again, had a very good team that year, and it was nice because Dougie Waite, very, very proud, very, fantastic player for Edmonton for years. And it was nice to see him finally, win a cup and do it against his former team. It kind of softened the blow a little bit, but yeah, it was. But I'm not one of the one of the dreamers out there that says, "Oh, Edmonton got screwed. They were the best team in the world."
One that got away.
Yeah, they were an 8 seed, and they just went on a magical run. And like you were saying with Calgary, they got hot at the right time, and you see it all the time. So yeah, I think that you look at this year's Edmonton roster versus the 2006 version. Fernando Pisani's. Probably wouldn't even make the roster this year, right? So I love the guy. Don't get me wrong. He, obviously had a magical goal scoring run, but I think Zach Hyman eclipsed his record by the second round this year. So we can kind of look at that for what it is.
Yeah. Well, look at us with the perfect transitions here, because we're talking about obviously playoff runs ending, and what does every hockey player do after their season's done? They hit the golf course.
Yeah.
Just happened to be a little bit of a tournament that went down this past weekend, which unfortunately we didn't have repeat Canadian winners, but the boys were in the mix all
Yeah,
weekend long at the RBC Canadian Open. And, we'll give a golf clap to the Scotsman, Mr. Robert McIntyre there, taking it down. Good for you. But, we had both Hughes and Connors right in the thick of things. Both of them were top 7 finishes. So
yeah,
always exciting when you've got a competitive field, where this one was coming right down to the wire. There were a bunch of lead changes going on. And, but also when you've got a chance heading into the final rounds of, hey, is it going to be a homegrown talent that ends up winning it? And didn't unfortunately get that magical moment of seeing someone have to get tackled on a green on 18 this year. But it was a pretty entertaining event that went down at Hamilton Golf and Country Club there.
yeah, yeah. And I think you can always give respect to Mr. Reliable Corey Connors, because like that guy's in the running every single tournament that he plays in. He's so consistent, he's so steady, and that's why he's the number one player in Canada, right? He's just as unflappable as you can get, and hey, top 10 finishes, they still make you quite a bit of money. So I think he's happy with his performance, and so is his bank account. But yeah, like, great story with Mr. McIntyre there, because obviously his dad was caddying for him, for the tournament, and just to kind of see that moment after he won and his dad being full of emotion, like that was just really nice to see. So, but yeah, I mean, you look at the state of Canadian golf. I don't think I've ever seen this many, true contenders in every tournament that you're looking at right now.
It
I
used
mean,
to be
you've
Mike
got
Weir and the also rans,
yeah,
essentially.
exactly. Stephen Ames, who wasn't even wasn't even born in Canada. You know what I mean? He just had citizenship. But you look at you've got 7 to 8 guys every single tournament now that if they get hot at the right time, they can make a run at a top 3 finish. And again, it seems like we're talking about a different sport every week on this show, about how Canada's taken the next step up in producing more talent. And it's true, like whether it be men's or women's basketball, men's or women's soccer, lacrosse, and now we're talking about golf. Like, this is such a great time for Canadian sport because everybody is excelling, and it's fantastic. So I think that Golf Canada really, is doing something right in promoting the sport and making it more accessible to more kids. And as much as we want to say the cost of playing golf is not exactly the most fiscally responsible thing, I think it does give a lot of kids who might not have, the athleticism that a lot of other kids do have, the chance to compete at a very high level. So I love the fact that we're seeing Canadians compete. I love the fact that we're seeing Canadians compete for Canadian championships. And yeah, I think the future of Canada golf is extremely bright, because it's not like these guys are in their 50s, right? Like, all these guys are in their 20s, early 30s, and they're all making serious runs at becoming that number one guy in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's all without even highlighting the fact that Taylor Pendrith also finished 21st overall in the
Yeah.
event as well too, right? So it really is an exciting time. And I would almost, I don't know how the format would have to be changed. I guess it's like Europe versus North America, but it'd be kind of cool, in whether it's the President's Cup, Ryder's Cup, whatever it is, to see, maybe some of these Canadians start getting involved in it, because you want to talk about, the decorum and the button upness of golf kind of getting thrown out the window a little bit whenever those events are going on, and it's nation versus nation.
Yeah.
It's a pretty intense feeling. And that's exactly what Full Swing season 2 on Netflix kind of focused on and built up towards, was the Ryder Cup. And you see just how invested these guys are in it. And that's how you really grow the game and start getting some new levels of fandom involved, is some of these international tournaments. So I would love to see some sort of tie in the future to that. Or who knows, maybe Canada needs to challenge like Japan or something, and it's Matsuyama and the boys get a team together and we do
Yeah.
a cross Pacific one instead of a cross Atlantic one. So if anyone at Golf Canada is listening right now, we will accept royalties for that idea. But
Yeah.
I did want to highlight a heartwarming moment, which talk about any fan's dream happening here. Obviously, you don't like to see someone get injured, right? But in this case, it was a caddy, and he ended up being all right. But Paul Emerson was just a fan who was attending the event when CT Pan's caddy hurt his knee somehow, and so he gets pulled out of the crowd. He puts the bib on, and for 2 holes, here he is caddying on the PGA Tour. Says he doesn't even fancy himself that much of a golfer, so was essentially just a pack mule. He wasn't exactly reading greens or providing yardage or anything like that. It's just, don't trip and smash the clubs up too badly. And if I need a ball, hand it to me. But quick golf clap for Mr. Emerson, stepping up like a good Canadian lad and getting the job done at the RBC Open.
It was a real Happy Gilmore type of moment. You know what I mean? It's just like
hands him a Breton cracker for a ball marker.
It's going downhill and slanting left. No, it's because you only got one shoe on. It was the guy's probably there having a couple of drinks with his friends. It might be a tradition for them. It might be, hey, this is a one-off. I've always wanted to go to a Canadian Open, and just randomly, hey, come carry my bag for a little bit while I sort this caddy thing out. But yeah, that was a really cool moment to it. I mean, it seems like every year the RBC Open always just has, one or two of those things that just stick out to people that they're talking about for a long time afterward, right? So, once again, it delivers on the excitement, on the storyline, and yeah, like I said, we're talking about all this, and we're obviously we're not even mentioning the state of women's golf, because obviously Ottawa's own Brooke Henderson is one of the top players in the world there too. But before anyone kind of jumps down our throat to say, well, you're not even mentioning the best Canadian golfer out there, we're only talking about RBC, right?
Yeah.
So we'll give her flowers in due time, don't worry. But yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, it was a great tournament. Tuned in for a little bit and saw, some really good golfers. I still love the fact that you're seeing some of the top guys like Rory McIlroy still coming to this tournament, religiously, right? It's great to grow the sport. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot more of these, young guys who are coming up and now challenging, because they're high-level amateurs, because of people like Dustin Johnson, Rory McIlroy, Adam Scott. Like, all these guys coming up and playing in this tournament is huge. And people don't understand the impact that it has. And obviously we're seeing the benefits of that by the state of Canada golf right now.
Yeah. And that's the only little gripe that I do have with the PGA right now, is the fact that, for those that don't know, essentially what the PGA has is they've got their kind of marquee events, and then all the other tournaments. Any given weekend, there's actually more than one tournament going on tour most of the time, and players can kind of pick and choose which one they go to, and some receive lots of TV coverage, the other ones not so much. But essentially, if it's a designated one of these marquee events, the top golfers, unless they're medically unable to attend, have to show up for it.
Yeah.
And RBC sponsors not one but 2 events on tour, actually. So they've got the RBC Canadian Open, obviously, and then they've got the RBC Heritage as well, which is a nice tournament. It's got a little bit of prestige to it, but usually happens right around Masters weekend. It's not the focus of a lot of things. It's not a country's national tournament like the Canadian Open is. So, but that one is designated one of the marquee events that players can't opt out of unless they've gotten special permission from the PGA. So my one gripe, flip those 2 designations. Make the Heritage optional. You want to go down and spend a nice day out around Augusta, fine-tuning your skills on all of that. Great. But let's start getting a little bit more star power than just, McIlroy and maybe a handful of others coming up north, because you want to really start growing the game. I mean, you've got all this Saudi money coming in, and we won't even deep dive into that, but you're already trying to build things kind of westward or eastbound globally. Let's go a little bit north here as well too, and you start getting the top 10 players in the world all teeing off on Thursday. Guess what? There's a lot more eyeballs. There's a lot more sponsorship dollars. Maybe you're getting the next Mike Weir or Brooke Henderson coming up through the ranks because they went and attended one of these events.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Get on it. Get on it, Golf Canada.
So that's 2 free ideas for you guys there. Yep. Royalty check's going to be sent to info@1867 Sports Show. Oh my goodness. Final topic of the week here, because we are now officially into week 1 of the CFL. Everything's kicking off coming up here. We've done our training camp previews. We've gone through who the sports books kind of like heading into the season, who are the long shots. And spoiler alert, the Red Blacks are creeping up all of a sudden. No longer the longest shot in the CFL after a
There you
strong
go.
preseason. But wanted to see, what is the one storyline heading into this year that you are most intrigued by?
I mean, we'll take out the what just got settled today, which is the Chad Kelly lawsuit.
Those
Because
that are
obviously
listening, go back a couple episodes. We
yeah,
deep dove it there. So then
yeah,
you can
we
come back to this
talked about
episode.
it there. Yeah, yeah. And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe to the 1867 Sports Show and the 9 Sports YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're looking at a season like I was talking about last week that I'm so excited about, because there's so many great storylines heading into this year. But the one that just keeps coming back and that intrigues me so much, we've already kind of talked about, I want to say about 6 or 7 episodes ago, which happens out in Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen with that Elks franchise, from their ticket sales to their fan base to how they come out of the gate, record wise, is going to be the year that Chris Jones finally turns it around, or are they going to go through a 4th season of absolute, miserable football? But the thing that everyone is going to have their eyes on is, how does McLeod Bethel Thompson come back after playing a couple years down south? Can he regain that magic he had when he was playing for the Toronto Argonauts? Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't, how short is the leash before we start getting the Trey Ford chance to get him, back in and, playing some winning football? Because like we mentioned, when we talked about the situation before, Trey Ford has done nothing but play exciting football since he's coming to the CFL. Trey Ford has done nothing but win football games for a team that has not won football games the last 4 seasons. So this screams storyline, because you've got a winning quarterback in McLeod Bethel Thompson, who's been out of sight, out of mind. You got the young up-and-comer Canadian ratio buster, who again showed some promise last year and ultimately, maybe could take the next step forward if given the chance. And where are we now? Right? So I think that's the most intriguing storyline to me, because if they come out and win, 4 or 5 games in a row, hey, they were right. McLeod Bethel Thompson's the right guy for the job. He obviously, is the guy who can win football games for a Chris Jones coach team. And hey, we'll eat crow, right? But if they come out and struggle, I'm interested to see if they're gonna, be stubborn about it and not swallow their pride and just keep rolling McLeod Bethel Thompson out there, even if he is struggling, and keep a guy like Trey Ford on the bench, because that's when you're going to start to hear a lot of noise surrounding that franchise. And don't be surprised if you see one of these other teams who might be struggling and want to take a little kickstart. All right, well, if you don't want to play him, we'll make a trade.
Yeah,
because we will.
Yeah, and it's got so many layers to it as well, too, right? Like you were alluding to off the top, even from a sports business standpoint, there are probably quite a few people out on the East Coast that need to designate themselves Elks fans for this season, because it behooves them to have them go out there and actually. Yeah, I was going to say, you like the tie in there?
I love the fact that you worked in behooves for a team like the Elks. Fantastic work, my friend.
There we go. But it does play largely into their favor if they go out there and they do well, for the simple reason that look what just happened in Montreal, right? New owners, instant Grey Cup. Maybe that might entice some others who think that, hey, you know what? I want to also spend my money to win a fairly prestigious championship in North America here. So if Edmonton goes out there and performs really well and drums up a ton of interest, and suddenly you've got these billionaires that are tripping over themselves in a bidding war of, all right, let's drive some prices up. Suddenly, more money coming into the league, expansion. Let's get everything rolling here. And finally, Halifax and the Schooners, or whatever they end up finally labeling themselves out there.
I was going to say, I think that the Schooner's name is cursed at this point. So you got to rebrand it something else, because it hasn't worked in the 3 or 4 times you've tried it already. But anyways, continue. Sorry for interrupting.
It's the equivalent of the Titanic at this point in the ship lore.
It's like the Growlers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Don't give that sports management group another franchise out there. There's free advice to the CFL as well, too. But it does. High tides rise all boats here. And this is a case of, if they do well, guess what? That's suddenly back on the table in a real big way. If they fall flat on their face, and we're now talking, the leagues needing to step in or bail out money or this, that, the other, that is not great news for the CFL. So again, people love winners. If they get out to a hot start, regardless of who's under center, that is going to be good things happening for the entire league. If they're out there as another doormat and they're drawing 4,000 people to a game, that is not a quick way to entice money and new ownership and all of that to come out onto the East Coast.
Yeah. And first, before I get into my next point, again, kudos on the fantastic transition to say, high tide floats all boats, alluding to the proposed Halifax Schooners franchise.
I'm a very deep individual.
Apparently, you're a poet and don't even know it.
Yeah.
But what I was also going to say from a local perspective, I mean, you mentioned Ottawa creeping up in the sports book, favors and odds and whatnot, and rightfully so. I mean, they look like a different team. And I mean, we've only seen them in preseason, and they have a bye in week 1, which I won't get into because we all know how I feel about that. But I think that this is going to be a different iteration of the Red Blacks franchise, from everything you've seen over the last 6 to 7 seasons. Anyone who hasn't seen a Drew Brown interview, go to YouTube and watch a Drew Brown interview. He is one of the most honest and no nonsense type of interviewees that you're ever going to hear. And it's such a refreshing take from all the cookie cutter answers that you always hear, especially from starting quarterbacks. I think that Ottawa's going to fall in love with this guy if he even plays mediocre football, because he brings everything that you want from a starting quarterback, which is ownership. If he plays bad or the team's not playing well enough, he's the first guy to come out and say, I'm not playing well enough. I'm not galvanizing my team enough. We need to play better, right? And then 2, I mean, the guy just has the look of a successful CFL quarterback. Yeah. He's got the bandana. He's got the earrings. He's got the Fu Manchu. He's like the Gardner Minshew of the CFL. So, I mean, everything just kind of writes a good story for the Red Blacks this season, because there's a lot of optimism. It looks like they finally got the right guy under center on the surface. We'll see how it looks after a couple of games. But like we mentioned before, they've got depth at that position finally. Like, you had 4 guys who've actually taken meaningful snaps in the CFL coming into camp. You don't get that very often. So now that we've kind of seen everything fall where it is, I think that Ottawa, if they come out in week 2 for their first game and look good, that's going to create a buzz. And that's going to, bode very well for the future of that team. So, yeah, I think, just from the local perspective, we're looking at a exciting season, I think, for the first time in the Sean Burke, Bob Dice era.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about perfect transitions. You have set the table perfectly for my point of the storyline I'm going to be watching, is because, again, flip side of that coin is what happens if things don't go well in Ottawa, because this has been a very patient fan base and they have watched a lot of bad football, almost borderline unwatchable football in recent years here. And again, you can point to a litany of reasons, whether it was personnel, whether it was not the right fit, not the right coaching, not the right front office, whatever the case might be, right? There's probably a lot of each of those that go into it. However, this is a fan base who has stuck with the team. They've still had good attendance. right? But you're starting to see the honeymoon is already worn off with the Senators and new ownership and all of that. The honeymoon is now worn off on kind of Bob Dice and the boys. They had their grace period. So it's now time to deliver at this point. You can only expect mediocrity or worse for so long. That's especially true in a 9-team league, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about one of these, oh, there's 32 NFL franchises. So weird. We haven't made the playoffs in a handful of years. Like, guess what? It's a pretty low threshold to get to postseason football in the CFL in terms of what you need to do on the field. So this is a very, very interesting season to see everything that goes on with the Ottawa Red Blacks, because you could be seeing coach firings. You could be seeing, well, guess what? We're gonna have quarterback carousel again because the big Drew Brown signing didn't pan out, or someone got injured. We've already seen starting running back go down for the year. Is injury concerns going to be something that is a reoccurring theme for this team, or was that just a complete freak accident in off-season training? So it's the team that I think is at the biggest crossroads in the CFL in terms of if this is another like 4-win season. I'm not talking about you missed out on the postseason last week of the regular season on
you're competing.
Exactly, right? I'm talking another dismal year in the nation's capital. I've got to start wondering, like, who is safe and who has incriminating photos of someone to still be around if that they're able to survive yet another down year in the nation's capital.
Yeah. And again, I kind of figured that's where you were going, because I think we know each other well enough by now that, I know that you're going to take a pessimistic view of a local franchise.
I knew that's where you were going.
Yeah. So we can, just kind of, look at both sides of the coin. But
you just sit there and go, yay, it's great Ford. And I'll be like, I'm watching you, Drew Brown here. So very different approaches to how we're coming into this CFL season.
Well, it's good. We need to have the yin and the yang. That's why that's why our banter's so good. But I like you were saying, I agree with you. I think that if there's some struggles and it's kind of here we go again, because that's every season, right? And it seems like every season since they won the Grey Cup, it's here we go again. Oh, here we go again. And it's a record, right? And it keeps playing the same song on loop every single turn. So Ottawa's got to be good out of the gate, and they got to maintain a level of success. They can't go peaks and valleys like they have been, right? If you lose a game, come back, and you gotta somehow right the ship, so that way you don't go on one of those long losing streaks. Because as we've seen with this team, if you start losing 2-3 games in a row, I don't know what it is, but that losing mentality manifests itself on that field for some reason, and it can get bad in a hurry. So hoping for the best, because whenever you mentioned when Saskatchewan's good, the league is better. Well, listen, when Ottawa's good, then there's competition in the East. Mm-hmm. Because if not, it's going to be Toronto and Montreal again. So I look at it with a sense of optimism, but I also get the side of it where if they start falling into some of the old habits that they have been, it's going to be and it'll be even longer, right? Yeah. An even longer season than normal, because this was a sense of optimism coming into this year. So, like I said, the CFL is in a very good spot to take a leap this year in regards to fan engagement, fan excitement, and overall play on the field, because we've seen it kind of building for a couple of years now. And I think, if everything comes together, we could see that. And all that being said, obviously, Nathan Rourke watch is going to be on 24/7, 365 in this country, because if any hint of him getting released by the Giants comes up, okay, start emptying out the vaults, get the checkbooks ready, because if he comes back, whoever's the highest bidder, he's going to elevate your team and take them to the next level. So, anyways, all the great things we're talking about, all the storylines, all that gets thrown in the trash if Nathan Rourke becomes available. So we'll wait with bated breath on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would be remiss before we leave here if I didn't get your take on the actually just today breaking news related to the CFL that the Grey Cup halftime performer has been announced, and none other than your favorite band, the Jonas Brothers, are going to be performing at halftime this year. So we need to start the petition right away. Get Kirkwood onto the field for Grey Cup halftime 2024. Seeing the Jonas Brothers live up close and in person. There you go, buddy. Dreams do come true.
Listen, if you want to pay for my ticket to go to the Grey Cup, I will rock a Jonas Brothers t-shirt. I'll paint my face. I'll jump around with all the little teeny boppers there. I'll make the best of it. So we'll get the show sponsored trip out to out to the Grey Cup, and we'll go enjoy some Disney Channel stuff.
Yeah,
it'll be good.
The left shark of the Katy Perry halftime show there. Just go viral sensation.
Just steal. Well, I mean, we got to get more publicity for the show somehow. So maybe that's it. We just gotta start a petition to get me out to the Grey Cup.
Is that a streaker on the field? No, he seems to be wearing a flesh-colored bodysuit.
No, it's bodysuit man. Yeah. But anyways, like all jokes aside, I mean, they're obviously trying to engage a different demographic. And much like we saw the Taylor Swift effect in the NFL with, fathers being able to watch games with their kids because their kids are Taylor Swift fans, maybe this is the CFL's attempt to say, hey, maybe the Jonas Brothers will bring in a new demographic of kids who will want to watch the game with their parents because they want to see the Jonas Brothers perform at halftime. So, look, at the end of the day, if it brings eyeballs to it, I'm all for it. I'm not going to be here, the old fuddy-duddy saying, well, this is why exactly I'm not going to watch the Grey Cup. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's performing. What matters is the success on the field, and everything on top of that they can get eyeballs to, I'm all for.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And, that's exactly where kind of the internet got divided today. You had some of these crotchety older fans where it's like, I don't know what the Jonas Brothers are, and this, that, the other. It's like, guess what? I've seen people publicly decry that I'm not watching the Super Bowl because so-and-so is performing, or, oh, I'm not going to watch the Grey Cup because so-and-so. I have yet to actually encounter anyone in my sports fandom who has ever followed through on any kind of boycott because someone was playing a halftime show. If that person exists, my God, get a hobby because you don't have a lot else going on in your life. But if it brings in more eyeballs, and whether it's traditional fans, whether it's like you were saying, kind of that Taylor Swift effect, whatever, I don't care. Like I truly walk away or leave the room or, go to the bathroom when the halftime show is going on, unless I've got a props pool as to, how many outfit changes is Lady Gaga going to have. Or in that case, I'm glued to the television. But honestly, like good for them for finally trying something different rather than the kind of B-list country celebrity that they've been very happy to trot out over in the past as well too.
Who would you be referring to, Kyle?
I don't make enemies here. They could be an absolute diehard all 22 episode fan of the show. So I would hate to insult anyone. And by the way, B is pretty good, right? What are we, Z-list celebrities here?
I don't even put us in the alphabet. I think that we're far past that. But I was just gonna say, you better not be coming for Shania, because if you are, you and me are gonna throw hands.
No, first of all, we do not besmirch the names of Shania or even Celine or any of the great Canadian songstresses that have come out of here in recent memory. I would never dare do such a thing.
Okay, good. Anyways, but I mean, let's just hope for a good season all around. Let's hope that let's hope that the storylines can be robust this season, so that way we always have something to talk about each and every week, because it makes for good banter, it makes for good shows, and ultimately I think that when the league is in a good in a good spot, it makes for again, more people wanting to try the game of football. So hey, if you're a team get the community engaged. If you're the community, go engage with the team. It's a reciprocal thing. You need to have a good relationship with each other. Stop, alienating one another, and go out and enjoy some football in the community and at the stadium that you currently reside. So, anyways, I digress. Great talk tonight, buddy. Great talk tonight.